All right, perfect. So, welcome and thank you for joining the event Growing a Different Future for the Midwest Agriculture. It's great to see so many people joining today. And before we get started, I wanted to quickly introduce myself and our speaker, Wendy Johnson. So glad that she's here with us today. So, my name is Ruth Peltz. I'm a Terra LFA alumni, and I was part of the Dingoes cohort back in October 23. And I've decided to become an ambassador for this community. It was a really great experience. I'm a sustainability and customer success professional with over a decade of experience in global tech, CPG, and climate tech. And most recently, I led sustainability programs at RegrowAg, where I was partnering with agribusinesses and also food companies to implement regenerative agriculture programs. And I'm so very excited to be here today with Wendy Johnson. Welcome, Wendy.
Thanks, Ruth.
Um, a little bit about Wendy before I head it over to her. She has really an impressive background. So Wendy grew up outside of Charles City, Iowa, surrounded by an endless expanse of corn, soybeans, and hog troughs. She watched her parents struggle to keep their farm alive. Decades of monoculture production and declining crop prices had sapped the life out of the region. She got out as soon as she finished high school, eventually leaving the Midwest for Los Angeles. A decade later, though, she began to wonder about other possibilities for the land that had been in her family for 3 generations. She and her husband moved back to Charles City in 2010 and set about turning portion of the family's old farm into a model for sustainable, climate-smart agriculture. At what is now Jóia Food Farm, she introduced a perennial grain called kernza, oofs, and cattle to graze and fertilize it, and thousands of trees to reduce erosion. She also carved out a riparian buffer along a stream that winds through the farm. She hopes more farmers in the Midwest follow her lead. She now advocates for these practices in local and also regional farming organizations and is also lobbying for increased conservation funding measures in Congress' upcoming Farm Bill. Welcome, Wendy. Very excited to have you here today.
Thank you, Ruth. Very excited to be here. Thanks for everyone for tuning in. Um, I'm going to be talking about kind of what we do and what the future of Midwest agriculture can potentially look like. Um, and it's starting to. I want to give people hope that it is. So I want to give just a little bit of background first on where we are located. I don't know where everyone is coming from or tuning in today, but just to give you a perspective of the US and where we are located, we are right in the middle of this pink area in the Midwest, and specifically Iowa is the state. My mouse, or I don't know if you can see my mouse, but it's right here. And so we have Midwest is predominantly grains. It's also called the Corn Belt is another word for it. Um, but Iowa is considered one of the most biologically altered states in the United States. So less than 0.1% of our original prairie remains. On the left side of the slide is Iowa's native vegetation prior to pioneer settlement. And when I say pioneer settlement, mostly when fur traders were here, early in the 1700s, 1800s, and then the Homestead Act of 1862 drove settlement across the Mississippi River onto the prairies. And Iowa is a land of rivers. So there was a lot of water, a lot of wetlands, rivers, streams, and we still have these today, but they're really different, shaped differently uh, so that people could settle here because there's a lot of water. Now, most of the forests that you see in this are in the black shade area, shaded that's black, but prairie grass dominated this state and or where we are located. On the right side is this terrible blurry photo. It was an AI generated photo of what Iowa, where we are located, probably looked like prior to settlement. Where we probably had elk, we had bison, oak savanna, prairie, wetlands, oxbows, all these really wonderful attributes and a beautiful ecosystem that just doesn't exist any longer. So today, we look more like this. So if you've ever flown over Iowa, and you look down across the Midwest, most of it looks like this, grid patterned. Um, Roads were created according to the grids. All across here, that this photo is buried field tile, um, buried to drain the prairie and streamline things into actually streams into bringing that field or the water that falls from the sky onto the land into field tile, which brings it into waterways, streams, rivers, and eventually the Gulf of Mexico. The dominant crops are corn and soybeans, and the Midwest has about 127 million acres of agricultural land. And my apologies, I'm going to be talking in U.S. Metric terms, not metric. We don't use metric, but so I'll be using tons and acres versus hectares. So my apologies. Um, 96 million acres dedicated to growing corn and soybeans. And in 2025, Iowa alone had 13 million acres of corn and 10 million acres of soybeans. So, predominantly, when you look at this photograph, this is almost predominantly three-quarter corn, all these fields here, three-quarters corn and about a quarter soybeans. So Centerview Farms is the farm of my family farm and what I came back to. It was established in 1979. I'm a fourth generation farmer, meaning my great grandfather settled in this area and established a farm, and then with his son, and then with his son, and now I guess I'm the first female of this farming generation. And it is around 1,100 acres. And as you can see from this view, you can see how much corn is planted here. It's predominantly a corn production area. So we grow conventional corn, soybeans, oats, rye, and hay on this family farm. But we also use conservation practices to do this. And I'll be talking about this a little bit later of no-till, reduced fertilizer, I'm sorry, no-till planting, we reduce our fertilizer use, we use cover crops, and our marginal acres, we install prairie strips, CRP, which is Conservation Reserve Program, which introduces conservation practices like prairie grasses, grass buffers, practices like this that help with water quality. And then we've installed saturated buffers as well. And Jóia Food and Fiber Farm, which was established in 2014. This is the farm that my husband and I own. It is around 130 acres. It was formerly organic row crops. We transitioned from conventional row crops to organic row crops and now to mostly cool season pastures, warm season pastures, and perennial kernza. And we raise pigs, chickens, chickens for meat and eggs, sheep, cattle, ducks, and turkeys. And our agroforestry practices, you can see these are 6-year-old trees here, so quite young yet. But we have established riparian buffers, silvopasture, enhanced windbreaks, and a micro orchard. So a bit of background on me. I grew up in the 1980s. This was the height of the farm crisis. And if you aren't aware of what the farm crisis is in general, we lost over 300,000 farmers went bankrupt or lost their farms due to foreclosure. And I grew up on welfare. So we've lost a lot of farmers, even from 1935, which would be around the Great Depression, until today. So in 1935, we had about 6.8 million farms, and in 2025, we have about 1.6 million. So in little less than 100 years, we've lost over 5 million farms. So the average farm size is increasing. If you think back to the number of acres that are farmed in the Midwest, 127 million acres, the average farm size is increasing while the number of farms and the number of farmers are decreasing. Um, In my bio, Ruth read I lived in Los Angeles. I did not see a place for myself in Iowa. And actually, farming looked like a terrible occupation to get into. So I left for the big city and pursued a career in fashion. And during that time while I was there, I visited Brazil, and it was kind of an awakening moment to me. I visited Brazil with my dad on a trip where it, this was the time when soybeans production was really kind of starting to boom in Brazil, and so there was kind of a American farmers were interested in possibly investing in farmland in Brazil at that time, to be kind of, join the competition so that they have land in both places, large soybean production areas. But the what I saw here probably changed my scope of what I thought about agriculture in general, and really propelled me to start learning about our global impact as humans, as we are all eaters, and we wear clothing and wear fibers, and we are energy users. And this was probably one of the most impactful visits that really projected me into the type of agriculture and who I wanted to be and do in the future. And mostly it was because I witnessed from this little airplane that I flew around from over the Amazon forest, was watching it burn, and watching it burn to turn into this picture on the left, which is like regrowth after forest is burned, and then having cattle being placed on it to graze. And then to the lower right is what it turns into, is a field of very large fields, hectares of soybean production. And that trip really impacted me so much that I ended up moving to Brazil and living there for about 3 years. Um, and so after that experience, I returned to Iowa actually, and that was when I decided I wanted to farm. That's my dad and I, about 15 years ago now. So some of the basic observations that I noticed when I first moved back was these simple questions. And you all might be asking the same questions of why Midwest agriculture is and does the things that we do. But why don't farmers share how many acres they farm? If our soils are so rich, why are we only growing two crops? Why aren't more farmers growing more food and raising their own food? What happened to community farmer gatherings and equipment sharing? Why don't more farmers have livestock? Why are the animals locked up inside buildings and not getting the food on their own? And really, where are the farmers? You don't see anyone. If you drive around here, you don't see anyone on the land. And you rarely see animals on the land. So um, we've become very, almost like a very industrial, we have become a very industrial type business. So when I moved back, this is what we used to do. We used to use full width tillage before corn. And we used to put the sheep, we had a small flock of sheep. We put them out on this creek area where my riparian buffer is now. They ate really terrible forage, as you can see, and they're really meant to kind of clean up any kind of spilled grain or things that we had around the farm. So this is like worst case scenario. This is what we started with. And as I transitioned, this is non-organic acres, so we use cover crops. We started planting cover crops, and this is a drill on the left where we drill soybeans into standing green cover crops, and on the right, I'm planting corn, no-till planting corn into a cover crop. We started to take marginal acres out of production. So we have grass buffers, we have saturated buffers along riparian areas, we have forage plot buffers along crop fields, and we have prairie strips, which is on the right side, in and around pretty much all of our fields. And this is very unique. This is not normal. If you were to come to Iowa, you would not usually see these things. And if you do, it would be like, wow, I saw a berry strip, or wow, look at those sunflowers. So it's not very normal to see some of these practices. We also like to use small grains like rye and oats. So rye on the left, oats on the right, because our goal is to really be a low input producer. So that means reduce our nitrogen fertilizer needs, reduce our chemical inputs. And so we're using cover crops and livestock integration and green manure like clover, for example, multi-crop rotations, which means like rye, oats, corn, soybeans, pasture, and little tillage. We don't want to use a lot of tillage. Um, and so we want to reduce our artificial inputs to almost zero. That's our goal, but it takes time to do this. This is a typical organic crop rotation. Uh, Oats underseeded with pasture, then you have pasture and you graze that pasture, then you have corn and you have soybeans. And the tool I'm using is a field cultivator, or a cultivator, a row crop cultivator. I love organic agriculture. It's wonderful, but there is a need for, because you don't have chemical ways to battle weeds, you also have to use a different form, which is mechanical. And so we would go from a beautiful uh, grassland, like on the left, where we'd be grazing in our crop rotation, and then we'd have to use a pretty uh, severe tool like a plow to plow it up. And I started to realize we were getting more and more severe rain falls and saturated soils. And the location of our farm is one of, we are sort of at the bottom of three different small watersheds. So that means water likes to congregate in our area and start to flow downstream. And so we, in 2016 and 2018, we had some major flooding events. I couldn't get the expanse of all the flooding that happened in these photographs, but this is just an example of how things looked, how fast water can impact cropland, and particularly this is kind of our riparian area. It floods out uh, fields. So when you have soil exposed like this on the right, it makes you extremely vulnerable to soil erosion, which you'll never get that soil back. It just won't. It is the most wonderful natural resource that will not come back. You have to work really hard and long, and probably 1,000 years to start to gain what you lost. So this we just started to see more and more flooding events. And on the left is, what we used to do is till before we would plant. But look on the right, this is the same exact field. This did have corn in a different time. It did have corn grown in it, but this is the kind of impact that we would see. And these types of events are happening and occurring closer together and more extreme each time. In 2022, I believe it was, so we had 3 separate tornadoes in our fields within a 10-mile radius. And to harvest corn like this is nearly impossible. And we're seeing more and more of these events. Corn is a highly vulnerable plant. It's tall and thin, so it can fall over with wind. It can shatter with hail. It's very vulnerable to wind and hail specifically. We had a tornado here in December, which I don't know if has ever happened before. That was very odd. And we have now Montana and Canadian wildfire, oftentimes in the summer. It's becoming more of an event. We have had fall armyworms. The moths fly up from the south with hurricane winds, which is also didn't normally happen before, but we're seeing that more often occur year after year. And they eat forage, so they eat everything green that exists. So this was stockpiled forage for our grazing livestock that they had eaten through. And I think one of the most impactful situations we have right now is our soil erosion issues. So this soil that you see on the picture on the left, that soil did not come from that field. It came from across the road or from the air somewhere else. And the similar situation on the right with gray snow. Um, this just happened. I took this photo this last winter. This was just from one winter storm event. Um, we're losing a lot of soil at an astounding rate. And so we lose about 5 tons of soil per acre annually here. And soil is a natural resource. Like I said, it does not come back, it just doesn't grow back. It is, once it's gone, it's gone. It takes millennia to grow soil. So in addition, we're having 90+ degree days in October, which is very odd for us year after year. This is a new occurrence. I had a combine fire a few years ago, and it was very, very scary. More of these fires are happening because our machines run extremely hot, and everything that's dry and dead is like tinder. So we are seeing more and more bigger and extreme events. There's increased variability, there's larger disasters. And this is from the RMA. This is the amount of indemnities that are paid to farmers when we have these larger events. And these are in the millions of dollars. I'm sure some of you have seen this graph before, but this just shows that in the last decade, the number of extreme events are some of the largest and most expensive events weather-wise. Billion-dollar disasters, again, some of the largest in the last 10 years. So again, why do we grow just 2 crops that are vulnerable to extreme weather? Why don't we diversify and spread our risk? Who pays for all that crop indemnity and the farmer safety net? It's all of us, all US taxpayers. And corn ethanol and carbon exuded from ethanol plants is subsidized also. So we have really built a system for corn production, as you can tell. Um, Here is a picture. This was from the American Farm Bureau. This is this is projected USDA mandatory farm program spending for the potential next 10 years. And the Farm Bill is a really large piece of legislation that really affects everything from the price and quality of the food we eat to the health and sustainability of our nation's farms and natural resources. Right now, currently, US Congress is debating. Actually, they're not debating. They're pushing the Farm Bill down the road because, or kicking the can down the road, I guess is what it's called, because they have a disagreement with SNAP, which is the food assistance programs, with the rest of the Farm Bill. And these dollar amounts that you see here are in the millions of dollars. So we're looking at a potential of over $1 trillion Farm Bill, which I know is probably very difficult to make decisions about because of that large dollar amount. But a Farm Bill is the piece of legislation that helps farmers plan. And we can't plan if we don't have a Farm Bill. So we have not had a Farm Bill since 2018. I'm sorry, we didn't have a re-up of a Farm Bill since 2018. So we are still working off a Farm Bill that is 8 years old. No, 10 years old. Sorry, my math is wrong. 8 years old. So we need a new Farm Bill, but Congress today is not interested in having those conversations. Oh, and as you can see, crop insurance here is the second largest piece of the Farm Bill program. So we can plant these 2 crops, and if we fail, we can get paid more than planting and harvesting them, which is why the crop insurance title of the Farm Bill is so large. Um, why aren't large legislators looking at the correlation between the weather data and the dollars spent on federal disaster aid? And isn't being preventative more fiscally responsible than band-aiding? I would think so. And if we grow so much food to make it cheap, why does SNAP take so much of the farm bill? And why can't it be put together? Why can't food and nutrition be part of the agricultural, what we grow? And it can work together, actually, instead of being so separate, which is creating this very um, um, disparate issue. So these are kinds of the things that I hear around my area of why we can't change. And this is, you can't feed the world with organic, and we shouldn't fix what isn't broken. And I can't afford to take on more risk. And if it's so great, why isn't everyone doing it? So, Congress people are hearing these words from farmers, and so to avert a government shutdown, they are pumping billions of dollars that are actually covering these natural disasters. So, on the right is another flooding event we had more recently. This is a cornfield that's completely underwater, and this farmer will just continue once it drains. They planted corn into it, and all's good, right? Um, because farmers are getting band-aids or they're getting payouts. So on the left is just a list of really the billions of dollars that since 2018 have been put toward commodity agriculture. And this is really helping keep farmers reliant on subsidies and on this hamster wheel of corn and big commodity production. On the right are prevention investments for regenerative agriculture that uh, that were implemented during the Biden administration, but then were taken away during the Trump 2.0 administration. So we are continuing to. This is just another example of how we're continuing to why we can't change, why it's so difficult for the Midwest to change. This is, agriculture is a large portion of, of the cause of our growth in GHG emissions. Um, and it includes the CO2 emissions, methane, nitrous oxide, and electricity. And I couldn't find a graph exactly that had it actually, this graph more about transportation and industry and commercial, but agriculture actually, I think, takes a little bit more of this pie. If you added, from farm gate to end product, that it would probably be a much larger piece of the pie. U.S. emissions by region, the Midwest is one of the largest in the U.S. Uh, I found this really interesting to be behind actually Russia, China, U.S., India, Russia, and the Midwest is right there. So there are things that we can do, and things that we're doing on our farm is doing some of these things. We are using managed grazing. And this is something that was done, a study that was done at the University of Wisconsin a few years ago, but it shows kind of the differences in a corn soy versus a no-till corn soy with a cover crop and pasture managed grazing of the amount of carbon, the ecosystem services that's provided. And pasture managed grazing does provide really great ecosystem services, such as more soil carbon stored, storm runoff, which is water, phosphorus runoff, and pretty much zero soil erosion. Uh, I love this chart. I don't have a lot of time to get through it, but it is all of the really great benefits, and they're equitable. They're equal in benefit how regenerative grazing benefits the Midwest. And notably its nutrient and soil retention, its nutrient cycling, its infiltration and water retention, habitat diversity, and animal welfare as well. And the outcome is nutritious food. So what we have done, Joy Food and Fiber Farm, is we've transformed 130 acres from corn and soybeans to a grass forage mix and to Kernza perennial grain. And now we're predominantly perennial. This is just our crop and grazing returns. If you look at the net income line, um, when you look at conventional corn at $4.50 a bushel compared to perennial grazing, and then conventional Kernza and then organic Kernza, you can see that the net income, there's not a lot of income for corn. But this shows you that crop insurance is a large part of that. If you have to add that to that income, and then the farm programs are also an additional piece of that add to that return for that farmer. Whereas in everything that's outside of corn and soybeans does not have those payouts, does not have crop insurance support, does not have price support or revenue support. And yes, those net incomes look larger, but if you think about, I did not include this, but transportation, logistics, developing markets, storage, it really does eat up the majority of that net income because that infrastructure is so far apart. It's not easy to grow different crops and then get them processed and marketed. Um, I think I'm running out of time a little bit, but I'm just going to speed through these. I wanted to just show food as medicine. So US Americans are talking about food as medicine now, as we are spending more on healthcare and less on food as the years go by. So in 1960, we were spending more on food and less on healthcare. And today we're spending a lot less on food and more on healthcare. And this is a chart from 1980 to today, our increase in diabetes report diagnoses in the United States, and an increase in cancer rates as well. And Iowa is is the fastest growing rate of new cancers in the United States. And it was taking my breath away kind of when I saw this photograph, but it is astounding. We are in the heart, and we have, I think, the second highest rate of cancers in the United States, and continuing to grow. So I kind of came to this full cycle realization of what it is that I need to do after all these experiences and learning about these things that I needed to do to have a little bit more control over how I grow as a farmer. I don't want to rely 100% on the government for our growing our food, and I wanted to grow food for people that's healthy and fiber. So we started Joy Food and Fiber Farm because of all these things. We want clean water, we want more freedom, we want animal welfare, we want more profit, part of that margin. So we transitioned to perennial forages. We graze cattle and sheep. I know with climate there is issues of ruminants and methane, enteric digestion, and from my observation and science that backs this is that ruminants are a part of this solution. They eat forages and can help those plants and forages regrow faster so that they are photosynthesizing and grabbing more carbon from the atmosphere and recycling it faster. It is a direct synergy of forages and ruminants dating, millennia ago with bison and prairie as it once was. And so what we're trying to do is really biomimic what the bison and the prairie was like here, obviously at a much smaller scale. We grow 45 acres of perennial grain kernza, and we have perennial prairie seed plantings that we also graze. And if you haven't heard of kernza before, kernza is a perennial grain developed by the Land Institute. And these are root systems of perennial kernza compared to annual wheat. So annual wheat at 12 months to 20 months of age, this is the kernza root system compared to an annual wheat. It's quite impressive, and it makes our soils like chocolate cake, aerated, smells beautiful. Um, it has aggregates. It is the perfect soil. This is what you want to see, and it creates the soil with less than 10 inches of rainfall. We had the 10 inches of rainfall for 2023. It grew in a drought, and this was the kind of soil that we had. So this is our farm from an aerial perspective. And in May of 2024, we had over 12 inches of rain in just the month of May. And we are obviously the green square here, but you can see the type of soil erosion that's coming in from all the other fields around us. Um, it it is really impactful if you see it up close, the kind of a soil erosion that is occurring. But we are all perennials, so we actually capture some of the surface water. We capture some of this. I have a lot of my neighbor's soil. I don't want to, but I do, and but unfortunately, a lot of it is, and chemicals and fertilizer are entering into our water because of these really extremes and weather events. So we've planted more than 6,000 trees, and these are the type of agroforestry practices that we have implemented. And we love grazing. Grazing perennials is incredible. It feels powerful and meaningful, and planting trees alongside it in the silvopasture system on the left. And then on the right, this is sort of this is our riparian area. We'd like to mimic this in all of the different pieces of land that we manage and do something similar. We're gaining power from the sun to electrify our fencing systems and more grazing. Like I said, ruminants are very wonderful at being able to eat a little bit and then move on. And that's what bison did. They never stayed in the same place, they always moved around. We are mimicking that with not allowing our ruminants to eat down to the very, to the soil where you see soil. So on the picture on the right, on the left, I'm sorry, is where sheep and cattle have been, and on the left is where they go. We don't let them eat really far down, and this helps with that regrowth as well. So these are the things that we need to sustain an agroecological system as we are seeing increased inflated land costs and increased costs of living and equipment. But we basically need to use the investment that was made for corn and all of its subsidies as an example. And so that's premiums for regeneratively grown food. We need to reform crop insurance and base it on practices, not on yield. We need more stable markets. We need a USDA Farm Bill policy support so that farmers can plan and invest in rural development for infrastructure. And capital needs to come along a bit. So we developed a direct market farm business so that we had more control of our margins. This is a regional, this is online on our website, but it's a regional based uh, uh, direct farm business. We ship and we use buying clubs to deliver all of these products that you see here on the left. We also started a wool company using the wool that we shear every year from our sheep, a wonderful regenerative fiber, and we make it into wool rugs and blankets and comforters, mattress toppers, pillows. And then I've been a part of growing some businesses that are aggregating at a larger scale so that we can see some of this larger change at scale across the Midwest. And that includes aggregating meats from farms that farm regeneratively, and also grains that also farm regeneratively. The Perennial Promise Growers Cooperative is an ingredients company. We uh, we have we grow kernza. A lot of our growers grow kernza, but we are helping sell and market that kernza to larger companies, such as General Mills. And these are some of the ideas that farmers can do and actively do to provide some education to the public about, invite them to their farms, to see what it is they're doing. And more people are really interested in where their food comes from and fiber, and are interested in this. So these are just some ideas that I put together. Biochar production is one of them. So if you plant it, and they come. So what we've seen when we've done some of these transformational changes is that, wow, the wildlife comes back. We've created habitat for many different species that have come here probably for millennia. But since our ecosystem has been so altered, that we just never see them. But you plant it and they come back. And it's like wired in them as species. And it is the most amazing thing to be able to see some of the species that we see. I've never seen bobolinks before, and bobolinks fly from Argentina and Brazil all the way here to the grasslands to nest, for example. And we're able to bring the next generation to the farm to be able so they can listen and hear and touch and experience a farm that is ecological in nature. And the scientists come. We could not do some of this work without the data collection needed. Ecdysis Foundation is one of the groups that's really doing a long-term study on measuring and collecting data on regenerative farms. And people are coming to the farms. And so these are all the different kinds of people that we are inviting to our farm, giving tours and helping educate and building connections. And it also takes a village. So these are some of the organizations that we work with and that are really moving the regenerative movement forward. And when I say regenerative, I mean agroecological, from capital to nonprofits, support nonprofits to Minnesota Department of Agriculture has been probably is one of the examples that most states should mimic in terms of really helping support a more regenerative agriculture. So what can you do? First, read this book. This book is coming out in a few weeks. It's called Living Roots. It's the Promise of Perennial Foods. Liz Carlisle and Aubrey Straight-Krug are the editors of this. I have a chapter in this book in an essay. It's a compilation of essays of people doing really amazing things across the foodscape and landscape with perennials. Um, you should visit regenerative food and fiber farms, and purchase some of your food and fiber from these farms, and eat perennial foods. And if you're in the US, please exercise your right as a US taxpayer and ask your legislators to support regenerative agriculture. And that includes fair markets for all crops, expand existing infrastructure for more crops and livestock, support for regenerative food, and ag policies that support and favor diversified systems. And of course, follow Terra.do. Knowledge is extremely powerful. So your interest is the first step to this transformational change. Thank you for your time, and I will take questions.
Thank you so much, Wendy. This was not only very informative, so also very impressive. And thank you for doing this. There has to always to people start the process, and I'm glad you did it. And I hope more people will follow your lead. Really, really great.
Thank
Really
you.
to see how this works out. So we have a couple of questions. I'm gonna go through the Q&A first, and then if we have some time left, I'm also happy to take some live questions. So there's a question from Emmett. He, first of all, says, great presentation and work that you're doing. I think we were all very impressed. I worked on fall army worm abatement in the Democratic Republic of Congo, funded by U.S. aid, for smallholder maize production. Can you share any successful scouting to detect FAW or other tools that have been successful for larger scale production that you are engaged in?
Yeah, great question, Emmett. This is something that I'm very interested in, especially as we are seeing this more often and common. The majority of farmers in this area, obviously, they are corn, soybeans, so their products are already harvested. And so there are a few farms in the Midwest that are actually kind of succumbing to this issue because there aren't a lot of perennials around in the area. Um, so, what we have noticed and what we're starting to look at is that I'll tell you an interesting story. So, in this field, in this picture that you see here, Kernza is grown kind of on the northern edge, right? If you see my cursor right around here. Um, we had fall armyworm come through. They started they totally skipped the riparian zone, was not interested in that at all, which is the riparian is where all these trees are. They hopped into the forage, just where under these words are, and they picked their way through. They ate a section that we've always kind of had a problem. Uh, it wasn't a great establishment of the perennial forages. We've had some kind of invasive weed species come through. We know that our soils aren't as good in that location. They completely ate through the forages in that entire area. But then when they got a little bit more north and they got to some healthier forage, they skipped it. They weren't interested in it. And when they got to the Kernza, they were not interested in the Kernza at all. And then they actually retreated and they came back across and crossed to this riparian area and went to this other pasture here. And they ate here and there, and then they left. What I've seen in other fields of fall armyworm is that they will actually eat the entire field of forages that are there. We have a neighbor across the road from us who actually had a field of alfalfa, and it completely the armyworms here marched across the road and totally decimated and ate that entire. There was no green left. So we started to look at sugars in the plants, and we started to take I forget what the tool is, but it's like a garlic press, and you take the garlic press and then you can test the sugars in that juices that come out of the forages. And what we've noticed is the reason why maybe they didn't like the Kernza or didn't like the some of the forages that they skipped over was the sugars were higher. And we would find fall armyworm that was dead on plants with kind of like this green goo diarrhea. And what we learned was that those fall armyworms cannot digest high sugar plants, and plants with higher sugars are healthier. Something with I think we need a scientist here to tell us about how that interacts the soil and the plant interaction. You know why plants are healthier than others, why they have more sugars. But that was really astounding to us. That it's really based on soil health and plant health of how to combat fall armyworm. Now, non-scientific, but I am really interested in this topic. So I hope that you move forward with your research there.
Thank you, Wendy. And then another question, which was more about the tech side of things. Have you had any positive experience using digital tool, AgTech, to support your work in regenerative agriculture? If so, which ones have been the most successful and helped you to reduce costs? And then a follow-up, do you also track GHG emissions, or did you formally benefit from any offsets for your regen practices under last administration?
Whew, that's a lot of. I
So
might
let's
take
talk
10
about the
minutes only.
digital tools first, break it up a little bit.
Okay.
If you're
Digital
using the,
tools.
yeah.
Yeah, we are using kind of precision agriculture, precision tools such as we have planters that are precision that are for we don't overuse seed, for example. We have also and helps with seed depth and things like that. We use VRT, which is variable rate technology for nutrient application, um, and in part for our regenerative side of like perennials, we don't really use a lot of technology for this, though. I think we do need more data collection to be able to kind of to implement and create some of those tools. Um, as far as what was that the
The
question
second part
about?
was about GHG emissions, if you track those, and if you formally benefit of any off from any offsets from these practices under the
So
last
we,
administration.
yeah, very great question. We would have if we were part of a few different climate smart commodity grants, organizations that receive those grants, and we were going to be recipients of those. But those climate smart grants were removed, and so we don't have that data. Uh, I wish we had more data, and I wish we had utilized that time a lot more efficiently, because I don't know if we're going to see that again for a while. Uh, but what did come out of it was the Meridian Institute and the Natural Resource Conservation Service, which was part of the USDA during the Biden administration. They actually came out recently with a number of research reports that they did during the Biden administration to show GHG emissions, research based on GHG emissions, and what we've learned from that, and those are online. I can send the link to TerraDo to share with everybody. But if you look up the Meridian Institute and NRCS, you should be able to find them online. Um, but but basically, they found that adding perennial plantings to annual crops, so like prairie strips and grass buffers, and some of these marginal acre benefit practices, they saw a 0.33 to 1 carbon per ton accrual, but that was mostly due to nitrogen applied. So there wouldn't be any nitrogen applied on those areas. But integrating trees in crop and livestock systems really impacted carbon sequestered by 2 tons per acre per year. So that is kind of the data that we're kind of moving off of. I'm glad they were able to fit that kind of research in that short amount of time. But as you know, the Meridian Institute now is no longer, they were defunded, unfortunately. But their data is still online.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's try to get maybe through two more questions for these last 4 minutes. There's a question from Dusty. When converting a row crop field to a diverse regenerative farm like yours, what is the transition process and time frame for rehabilitating the soil back to life, given its degraded state after years of chemical fertilizers and plowing?
Plowing was at that last part. So
Plowing, yeah.
yes,
Hmm.
Kernza, what we have seen. So we didn't start with Kernza. We started with some of these uh, forages, so perennial forages and grazing. What we've seen through our different practices, so agroforestry, if you separate them kind of into three different pots: agroforestry, perennial grazing, forage grazing, and Kernza or perennial grain production, they all have benefits and can turn soils that have been under conventional management very quickly. I'd say in all of these practices, within a year, you're going to see some real transformational change. But I have to say that Kernza, perennial grain, is probably one of the most resilient practices that I've ever implemented, because I saw it grow in a drought, severe drought, 10 inches of rain the entire year. And the following year, uh, high flooding events, high rainfall, like 45 inches of rainfall in that year. So I got to see it in two very different environments and how resilient it is and how the soil structure looks, and smells and feels. And so I would say that perennial grain production can be quite transformational quickly. But agroforestry, most definitely, I mean, agroforestry has a larger impact carbon wise and water cycling wise than other types of, but I don't want to pit any perennial production against another. It's all wonderful, and it's all necessary and needed. But I'd say that, in that 1 to 2 year time frame, you can see transformation quite quickly.
Wow, that's awesome. And kind of a follow up to that in terms for that transition time, what were the risks and challenges? What risks and challenges do farmers face when they transition into farms like yours and away from commodity crops to a farm with livestock and diverse crops? Like, what were the risks and challenges that you were taking?
The biggest risk is lack of income, and there's no government support, so there's no
Mhm.
crop insurance, there's no risk uh, tools that we can take. So you're kind of doing it on your own, um, and you're kind of hoping that you're going to produce food or a crop or something that you can then sell. But as you know, perennials take time. Trees take time. If you grow an orchard of chestnuts and you want to sell those chestnuts, that is a 5, 6 year wait until you get that. Same with other perennial agroforestry crops, hazelnuts, also, um, timber, and our grain production too. It is, it's developing a perennial grain market is quite challenging. Those pieces of infrastructure just don't exist in this moment. And so it takes really a village to help create some of these infrastructure pieces that corn has had for the last 100 years. And research is another piece of that puzzle. So breeding programs for these varieties of agroforestry crops to perennial grain crops to grass forages. We just need more research on different varieties for increased yield, since everything right now is currently based on yield and not on practice. And obviously, we
Makes
don't
sense.
have the farm programs that the USDA, the Farm Bill, offers to large commodity groups. I showed you the billions of dollars that are supporting corn production, soybean
Mm,
production, and little to none for some of these perennial crops.
that makes sense. And kind of maybe as a last question, kind of pivoting or not pivoting, double down on that risk question that we just discussed. Elena would like to know whether the response that you hear from other farmers when you discuss regenerative or organic farming practices, what she mostly hears is, I can't afford to take more risk. Is it that what you hear, or do you hear other arguments from farmers that are holding them back to actually change their practices?
Yeah, absolutely. It's risk. They can't afford to take the risk. Land is extremely expensive. We have property tax. We have a lot of farmers rent land. So they have to have a rental payment or a land payment because they purchased it. And perennial agriculture and anything outside of corn, soybeans in general, even oats and rye and other annual spring crops and winter crops, they can't. There's the markets aren't existing to support that kind of risk and change. Um, and so, yeah, it is a difficult path forward, but I think it's really in the driver's seat of consumers that they are more interested in their food. They want to be healthier. They're seeing, like, from places like Terra.do, like they're seeing that things are happening that are kind of out of their control. Climate change is a big one. So they're starting to put consumers, we're starting to put our dollars where we want them to go. And I think that really brings a lot of power to this place, to how we can make bigger changes. And Farmers are looking at like, well, if it's so great, why isn't everybody doing it? And if it's
Mm,
so great, and that unfortunately they want to see other people take the risk first before they jump in. But I think in some of the cases, my neighbors see what I'm doing, they're not jumping in, just simply
mm.
because land costs a lot, and it keeps increasing. Um, and there aren't the infrastructure pieces in place or the risk mitigation there.
Thank you so much, Wendy. I know we're a little bit over time. This has been a really great presentation. Thank you for honestly sharing your experience. And as I said, it's great that you're the one starting it, and I hope a lot of farmers in Iowa and the other Midwest states are going to follow your lead to transform this land to be more healthy and more sustainable for everyone. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank
Thanks
you.
everyone for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.